Well, what's up, y'all? How you guys doing tonight? You doing all right? Good, good. Well, hey, we've been, like Myron said, we've been in this series on the Sermon on the Mount. And so where we've been for the last 6 weeks, we've been in a mini series within the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus has been giving us these statements. And all 6 of them, he starts out with, "You have heard it said," fill in the blank, and then he comes back at it with, "But I tell you," fill in the blank. And so we've been kind of walking through these statements, and they've been very hard hitting and very life changing if we put those into practice. And so now where we're at, we are what, 75% of the way through the semester, and we're finally through the first chapter of the 3 chapters of the Sermon on the Mount. So congratulate yourselves, pat yourselves on the back. We made it here. And so tonight we're starting Matthew chapter 6. And what we're going to see in the next 3 weeks is another little mini series. It's a little triplet, 3 paragraphs that are going to be about religious practices. And so when you think about Christianity, modern Christianity, and you think about what are like the core religious practices of Christianity in 2024, you probably say reading your Bible, going to church, and praying, right? Well, if you put yourself in the mindset of a first century Jew, and then you ask them what are the core practices of first century Judaism, those 3 things would look a little bit different, similar, but it would be serving the needy or giving to the needy. It would be praying, and it would be fasting. That's what a first century Jew would say are the core practices of a first century Jew. And so that's what this little triplet, this little mini series is going to be about these religious practices of giving to the needy, praying, and fasting. And so tonight we're going to look at the first one of those. We're going to look at the idea of giving to the needy and what Jesus has to call us out on that. And so to get us started, I have a question. Has anybody ever posted a post like this? Hashtag blessed. Has anybody ever cringed at or made fun of a post like this? What about, okay, I was thinking about this. What about like the celebrity charity music videos? Like, I don't know if there's like a lot of those, but like I was remembering one from maybe like 10 years ago where Carrie Underwood was on like the American Idol Gives Back thing, and it was like this. I mean, I'm a big fan of Carrie Underwood, all right? Like, country music, Oklahoma Girl, Rags to Riches on American Idol. But like, this was a cringy, like serving the needy type of video. And so like, you see those and you're like, oh gosh, okay. So anyways, my wife told me, she was like, hey man, like posting about serving the needy is not a bad thing. And I was like, okay, so if I offended you, I'm just poking a little bit of fun, all right? So don't get too offended. It's not all bad, and we'll come back to that idea. But that does feed into what Jesus is talking about tonight. So we're gonna dive into what he says in this paragraph that we're gonna look into. It's Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And so like we said, he's just finished all these statements about the old law, and then how's his interpretation. And so this is where he picks up this new series. He says, "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." So, I think that the most famous line, if I'm right, the most famous line from this little passage that people, very quotable, something I hear people quote all the time is, "Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing," right? When it comes to giving, and it's probably misquoted often as well, but the most famous line, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And I think people tend to summarize this paragraph with that statement. And if you give it a quick read, to me, if I give it a quick read at face value, what I hear in this paragraph is, don't let anybody see or know about the good deeds that you do for other people. And if they do, if anybody sees or knows about it, your works will be invalidated and God won't reward you for them. Isn't that what that paragraph kind of sounds like? If anybody sees what you do, if anybody sees the good things you do and congratulates you, your works are invalid and God won't reward you for them. But thinking this through a little bit more and digging into the meaning and spending some time on it, I think we're going to see that this is firmly not what Jesus is saying in this paragraph. And so I want to look at a couple of the reasons why. And the first one is that Jesus, I don't know, we've been going through this a little bit slowly, but Jesus literally just said the opposite. If you rewind a couple of weeks through our series to Matthew chapter 5, in verse 14, you guys are going to recognize this. He said, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house." This is the part to pay attention to. "In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may" what? "That they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." So how could it be that paragraphs ago, Jesus said, "You're the light of the world. Let your good works shine before men so that they may see your good works and praise your Father in heaven." And then a few paragraphs later say, "Don't ever let anybody see you do a good thing or else it doesn't count." So I don't think that's what Jesus meant. Here's another piece of evidence contained within this passage. Like I said, this triplet, it's about giving to the needy, it's about prayer, and it's about fasting. When you think about prayer and when you think about fasting, you could do both of those things and no one ever know about it. Those could be considered completely private things if you wanted them to, right? You could pray every day alone in your room. Nobody would ever know, right? You could keep that totally private. You could fast, you could not eat, and you could not tell anybody and nobody would ever know, right? Those could be considered totally private. But that argument breaks down when you look at doing good deeds for the needy, because it is inherently seen by others, because the people you are serving are going to see you doing that good deed. So again, it can't be possible that Jesus is just saying, hey, this is only supposed to be private, and if you get any recognition or are seen doing it, you don't get any credit. And then also, I wanted to think about that famous line, "Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." And we love that, and I love it. It's a really great imagery, but I want to think about it for a second. So imagine that I've got a wall just like sticking out of my chest, right? Okay, and I got my head on this side of the wall, but there's a wall, and like over here's my right hand, and over here's my left hand. And so with my right hand, I'm over here like, putting money in the offering, right? Or I'm over here like giving to the poor, and my left hand can't see what my right hand's doing, right? So like, yay, go me. But like, does my left hand have a brain? Does it have eyes? Does it have, no. They're controlled by the same exact thing. This statement is not even possible to do something with your right hand and have your left hand not know about it. So therefore, what is the point? Just like we've seen Jesus doing already in the Sermon on the Mount, it's an exaggerated statement intended to illustrate a point. It's an exaggerated statement intended to illustrate a point. So, I think we have sufficient evidence to say that this passage is not telling us that if anybody sees or becomes aware of the good works that you do, they're invalid and God won't reward you for them. I think we have good evidence to say that that's not what this means. So, let's figure out, what is this passage actually saying? And I think it revolves around one particular word. And that word is hypocrite. Shows up in verse 2, the hypocrites. And this is a loaded word in our day and age. It's a word that we use all the time. And so I want to dive into the meaning of this word a little bit, though, because it's very important to the understanding of this passage. So the word hypocrite, actually, it is a Greek word. It comes from the Greek word hypocrites, or hypocrites or something like that. I don't know how you say it, but we're going to say hypocrites. And so what it means is actor or stage player. But even when you dig into the roots, it's actually made up of two Greek words that you could literally translate as an interpreter from underneath. An interpreter for underneath, or an actor or a stage player. And here's what I'm getting at. You guys ever seen these like Shakespearean masks? This word hypocrite is referring to, in Greek theater, where these little masks come from that sort of have come to symbolize the theater and drama, they come from, can we put the picture of the older one? I'm sorry, it's creepy, but it's almost Halloween. So this is an actual historical theater mask, but this is where this idea comes from, because actors in Greek theater would hold these masks or wear these masks to make their emotions more expressed, or to show different characters, the same actor playing different characters, or show different emotions at different parts of the play. And here's why. Recently, a couple weeks back, I got to go see Hamilton at the Benedum Theater in Pittsburgh. It was awesome. Place is absolutely beautiful, and it was amazing. But our seats were way up at the top. And just looking from the stage, do you think we could see people's facial expressions from where we were sitting? No, not at all. Not at all. But okay, all right, this is a modern theater, modern materials and construction. So let's look at an older theater. A couple years ago, I got to go to Israel, and this is the theater in Caesarea. And I happened to take a picture from up at the top, and there's people in it. And can you see their facial expressions from there? I can't. So this is why they did this. They had these masks so that people could see their not their facial expressions, but see these faces that were illustrating the emotions that they were feeling, or the character that they were playing, or whatnot. So I think that is such a powerful image when you think about the word hypocrite. And now the word hypocrite goes back to this idea of an actor behind a mask. Now, if I were to ask you to define the word hypocrite, you would probably say something similar to someone who says one thing and does another thing, right? Someone who says one thing and does the opposite would be our modern definition of hypocrite. And I don't think that's wrong. But I think when you look at this passage, Jesus' meaning of the word hypocrite, and when you look at how he calls people out in the Bible, it's slightly different. It's just a slight difference, but it is different. And his meaning for hypocrite is someone who does the right thing, but for the wrong reasons. And so isn't that powerful imagery with what Jesus said? I'll read it again. He said, "So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by men or by people." He's calling out the religious leaders who would do good works on the outside, but their good works are like masks that are hiding who they really are underneath and hiding their true motivation. And what was their true motivation? Was to gain the honor and the praise and the adoration of other people. They wanted to hear people say, "Oh, how pious is that man? How holy is that Pharisee? Oh, how generous is he?" And that actor behind the mask, putting on a face that doesn't represent the real heart behind the deed, is the kind of hypocrisy that Jesus is talking about. And so I want to look back and just kind of highlight some key verses now that we've fleshed out this word hypocrite and seen how Jesus is applying it. I want to flesh out some key verses. So I'm going to read verse 1 again. We're in 1 and 2 again, and it says, "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men or before people to be seen by them. If you do, then you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." Verse 2, "So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by men," or by people. And so this same phrase showed up in both of those call outs. Don't do it, to be honored by people. Don't do it with the motivation of getting credit or praise or adoration or award or reward from people. He's clearly referring to the motivation behind the deed. And so, what does it look like in our context to announce it with trumpets? The obvious one, it looks like posting it on Instagram. It looks like posting it on social media. And look, I mean, really, if we look at that definition of hypocrite, someone who does the right things for the wrong reasons, then it's not wrong to post it on Instagram. It can be right. It can be a good thing to share what God is doing through you, through your friends, the people that you know who are serving Christ, and what he's out there doing in the world and the way that he's blessing people. So it can be a right thing, but it can very easily have the wrong motivation behind it. You can very easily do it for the likes and the comments, or even to feel good about yourself. Or maybe in a more tangible way, to time our good deeds or our giving so that they're done in view of others, right? And so like the classic movie example, like a guy is got an opportunity to help. He sees an old woman struggling with her groceries, and he's like, there's a cute girl over there, and he's like real quick, like check his hair and make sure he looks like he looks good, and then he like waits till she's looking, and then walks up and like, oh, here, ma'am, let me help you with those groceries. And I think we do that in different ways, maybe not as humorous as we see in that movie scene, but it's where we're timing something and we're trying to do it in a way so that we make sure we're seen. And so as I think about this, one thing that I feel like I've got to call out, one thing that came to mind is this idea that I haven't seen the research or seen the statistics, but there's definitely a narrative and anecdotal evidence out there that says the number one profession that Gen Z and Gen Alpha want when they grow up is to be an influencer, right? And if you're a Christian, a lot of Christian Gen Zers and Gen Alpha-ers want to be Christian influencers, pastors. But I got to ask, why do you want to be a pastor? When we look at famous pastors, we see people like Craig Groeschel or JP, Jonathan Pokluda, or Sadie Huff, Louis Giglio, Tim Tebow. And we're like, man, look at how many people they can influence and look at all the good they're doing in the world, and I want to do that. And listen, I love all those people that I listed. They're incredible ministers of the gospel. They're reaching an incredible number of people. But the reality is that it used to be and still is that becoming a pastor was a commitment to obscurity. It was a commitment to being not famous. It was a commitment to being unappreciated by the people that you're leading. It's a commitment to being overworked, working more than 40 hours a week, and pretty much never stopping work because you're making hospital visits, you're getting midnight phone calls all the time. It's a commitment to leading a small flock of culturally unimportant people. And by the way, it's a commitment to not making a whole lot of money. And so the question is, if that's what comes with being a Christian leader, is it still what you want? And so if this passage is all about doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons, what are the right reasons? Well, what might be the right reasons? And I've come up with two. There might be some more, but I come up with two. And the first is obeying God. I think that obeying God is a right reason to do the right thing. And we see that in Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 to 39. He says, Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he says, the greatest commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. And so Jesus said, the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second is like it, to love people. So to love people, to serve your neighbor, to serve the needy, to do good deeds is to obey God. Obeying God is a good reason to do the right thing. And then the second, it's very much the same as what he just said, but the golden rule. Most of you were probably taught it by your parents. Maybe you didn't know it came from the Bible, but it's in Matthew chapter 7. We'll see it later in our series, but it's do to others what you would have others do to you. So, if you were poor, if you were in need, would you want someone to help you out? Would you want to be served? So obeying God is a good reason to be doing the right thing. Another right reason I would say would be honoring or worshiping God. In James chapter 1, verse 27, it says that religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. And so, we can honor and bring praise and worship to God in what he says, that religion and worship that is pure, by looking after the orphans and the widows, by serving the needy. That's a good reason to be doing that. And so that famous line, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. I would say we should be really cautious when our acts and our works are visible. We should try to give privately if we're going to give. And we should try to avoid the spotlight when we're serving or when we're doing acts of righteousness. Now, again, that doesn't mean you have to go out of your way to draw more attention to yourself by trying to get the spotlight off of you. But I think we need to take that statement seriously and try to stay out of the spotlight. And then this, when our giving is visible to others, we need to scrutinize our motivations. And sometimes you probably do an act of charity or something like that, and you might receive more reward than you ever imagined through, like if you're serving people in a third world country. Like one of the things that I saw and that people would always say when we would go on those trips was, I can't believe how much joy these people have. I cannot believe how they have nothing and yet they're so joyful. And so you might receive far more from these types of things than you imagined you would. And you might receive a lot more praise and adoration from people than you imagined you would. And so I think we need to all be challenged to scrutinize our motivations and make sure we have the right heart behind our service, and that it's not about getting praise or adoration or attention on us. And so the next thing I want to look at in this passage is the idea of rewards, because that was another repeated statement that Jesus made, was that, if you go and you do your good works so that they can be seen by other people and you get the adoration and the praise, you've already received your reward. That's all you're going to get, and God won't reward you in heaven. That's what he said repeated times. And so, it kind of makes you question, what is this reward that God is talking about? And so the reward on earth, I feel like it's like, what is the reward that he's talking about? Well, think about buildings and structures and things you see around campus or around the world. Think about the Benedum Theater, right, where I was at. Where did it get its name from? Well, it got its name for Claude Worthington Benedum, his foundation, which was the primary donor that helped build the building. They got their plaque, they got their name on that building. And I'm not hating on the people who donate money to build these amazing buildings that create amazing experiences for us. I'm really not throwing shade at them, but it's a great example. Or here's a more fun one. What's that place called? Don't call it Acrisure Stadium. Heinz Field, right? Is what it used to be called. Do you think they just like the word Heinz? No, it's named after a family. Their last name was Heinz. And so, and the point that I'm illustrating is this, is like, you walk around your college campus and you're going to see names on buildings and names on dorm rooms and names on stadiums. And when you get that plaque, when you give that donation and you say, I want my name on that building, I think what Jesus is saying here is, you got the plaque. That's what you asked for and you got it. And that's all you're going to get. And so then I think the other thing we wonder is, what's that reward in heaven? What's the reward in heaven that God's talking about? And I don't know. I don't know what it is. I mean, is it a mansion in heaven? Is it a throne? Is it a spot closer to God's throne than to other people's? I don't know. Although I have one thing I think. I think that in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus ends a parable with a statement that really speaks to my soul, and I hope it speaks to yours as well, where the servant has served well, and the master says to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And if I had to answer what is the reward in heaven, I think that's what we're shooting for, is to live this life and go through this struggle and serve people in a selfless way, a self-sacrificing way, and to get no recognition for it, to get no appreciation for it, to get no thanks for it, and then to meet our Father in heaven someday and be told, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Sounds like a pretty good reward to me. The last idea or topic I want to cover from this little paragraph is the idea of giving to the needy. And it's kind of hidden in here in plain sight. There's an assumption here. Verse 2, he says, "So when you give to the needy." He didn't say if you give to the needy. So there's an assumption built in here that Jesus' followers are giving to the needy. And so I guess my question is, right, like giving's a hot topic, but where we're at in life, how can a college student or a young professional, early career professional, give to the needy? When I ain't got no money and I'm working on paying back my loans and I'm working on starting up my life and I'm just trying to meet ends meet, I'm just trying to pay the bills, I'm just trying to pay tuition and stay on top of things. How can a college student or early career professional give to the needy? And I mean, the answers are not anything you haven't heard before, but the first is time. The first is time. And here's what I'll say. I was a single young adult for a really long time, and I always hated it when people would stand up there and be like, "You guys think you're busy, but you're not really busy," and you'll find out what busyness is later on in life. I always hated it because you guys are busy. You're really, really busy. And you know what? You're busy doing really, really important things too. I mean, getting your education and studying for your future and providing for your household, whether that's just you or if there's other people depending on you. Like those are important things. But I do think that we can take something from the people who have said that to us before, right? And maybe they said it in a good way, maybe they said it in a bad way, but the point is that as you move forward in life, you're going to be really busy with important things in the future as well. And you may be really busy with even more important things than what you're doing now. I mean, for sure, like think about when you get married and you've got to, all of a sudden, you've got to prioritize your spouse's needs above your own and your spouse's wants above your own and your spouse's good above your own. You're all of a sudden really busy with something really important. And then think about when you have kids and now you've got little mouths to feed who literally can't provide for themselves. And that's, I think, where that heart comes from is like, hey, you don't know what it feels like to be needed for 16 hours, 18 hours out of the day, and sometimes 24 hours out of the day. That's what busy feels like. And so I think we can learn from the people who are a little farther on in life than us, recognizing, yeah, I'm busy. Yeah, I'm doing important things, but it's never going to let up. And the stakes are going to get even higher. And so, really what it comes down to is, what are your priorities? What are your priorities? I mean, are you willing to give your time now? Are you willing to make giving up some time for the good of those in need a priority in your life? And the second one is, of course, money, right? And you're like, I ain't got no money. I ain't got none of that. I ain't got none to give. And I'm not going to talk about this for long, and I'm going to say something that some of you are probably going to get upset about, but I promise I'm not giving this as advice. It's just something I saw that really amazed me. And it was a friend of mine who was in med school, and back when I lived in Oklahoma, and he was talking to me and he was like, yeah, I actually have decided that I'm going to tithe my student loan checks. I'm going to tithe 10% of my student loan checks, which I think a lot of you may struggle with that question because it's like, that's not my money. I'm borrowing that money and I'm going to have to pay it back someday. So why would I give away the money that's not even mine? And so I'm not saying you should do it, but I love the heart behind that man who said, I feel like God is calling me to trust him with what he's entrusted me with and to say I can live on 90% of what I'm getting. Again, not giving you advice on that, but I think the heart behind it is really cool. And it's a challenge for all of us. So, just a couple summarizing points from this paragraph. And the first is this. This teaching is not telling you to hide your good deeds. It's telling you to not do them so that others can see them and show you appreciation. It's telling you to have the right motive for doing the right things and for doing good deeds, all right? So this passage is not saying that if you get seen, you ain't getting credit for it. The second one is evaluate your deeds. Even if you're doing the right thing, are you doing it for the right reason? Scrutinize your motives. And the third one is that posting on social media is not inherently wrong. Posting on social media about the good things that God is doing, and even if it's something he's doing through your life, is not inherently wrong. But it's one of those signs that says proceed with caution, right? If we're going to do that, we need to be very, very cautious and asking ourselves the tough questions like, what is my motivation for posting this? That's all I'm trying to say. And so I feel like, this is a tough message, and I feel like the idea of hypocrisy and of doing the right things for the wrong reasons is a little bit of a tough word, and I hope that people aren't feeling like I'm shaming them, because the reality is, and this was made evident to me again just yesterday, is like hypocrisy is the biggest piece of my story. Hypocrisy is the biggest theme of my testimony, because I was basically born and raised a Christian, right? Like my parents told me that I gave my life to Jesus when I was 4 years old. And it's like, so for the longest time, I thought like I was good. I didn't really have a testimony. I didn't really have anything to share because I was a good kid. But what I've learned is that I was like, because I was perfect Ryan. That was what I was doing. It's like I was going to be the perfect kid. I was going to be the kid who got good grades. I treated everybody nice. And I obeyed all the rules. And like, when I was in high school, my parents' friends, when my friends would ask their parents if they could go and do something, their parents would be like, well, is Ryan going to be there? Because if he's going to be there, then it's probably not too bad, right? That was the persona that I was trying to put out. But behind that perfect persona was an incredible amount of hidden sin that nobody knew about. And just this idea of hypocrisy being doing the right things for the wrong reasons became very evident to me last night at my life group when I was talking about the part of my story where I played tennis in college. And, I felt like I was a missionary to my tennis team. And I was talking through this with my life group, and I was about to say, because I felt like I was called and I was there to share the gospel with my tennis team. And I paused and I was like, no, I wasn't that mature in my faith at that point in time. I wasn't there to share the gospel with my tennis team. I was there to show my tennis team how good of a Christian I was and how good of a person I was so that they would feel shame for how bad of people they were. And I was there to go to the parties and not drink so that they would feel bad about themselves. And I was there to not sleep around so that I could look at them with judging eyes when they would tell stories about their own endeavors. And so, if you're a hypocrite, join the club, man. But Jesus has enough grace for you. There is grace for that. And that the point of this passage is not to tell you that you're beyond saving or that God's even mad at you, but it's to tell you that he's big enough for you, and that what he did on the cross is big enough for you, and that you can leave hypocrisy behind and you can seek after God and try to do the right things with the right motives. And when you believe in the gospel, when you believe in who he is, and you believe that he died on the cross for you, and it was your sin. Like, I'm not a good person, and I never was. And what I needed to be saved was someone who was a good person to die in my place, and that was what Jesus did. And so, yeah, the gospel's for you. If you feel like you've been living in hypocrisy, God's not mad at you. I'm certainly not mad at you. But you can make a change, and you can do that by acknowledging where your heart's at, laying that before Christ, and accepting who he is and accepting what he's done to earn your forgiveness. And I think my last observation on this was that this passage, for those of you who are out there doing good works and you're not being thanked for it, and you're not being recognized for it, and other people are being given thanks, and they're being given elevation, and they're being given promotions, and they're being given awards, and you're like, nobody even notices me. I think this passage can be an encouragement for you, and I would encourage you, take that to God in prayer. Just take that grievance, take that hurt, take that feeling of unappreciation, take it to God in prayer, and trust that he will reward you. Even if no one is noticing you or thanking you, and I'll take it this far, trust that he will reward you because no one is noticing you or thanking you. If the band wants, they can start working their way up here. But Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 through 10. I love this verse. It's such an encouragement to those people who are out there doing the work and not getting thanked for it. It says this, it says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers." So yeah, if that's you, don't grow weary. At the proper time, you will reap a harvest. And that may be your reward in heaven that you're waiting for. But the cool thing is that Jesus is the ultimate example of not receiving praise and adoration from others for the good works that he did with the right heart behind it. Yes, early on in his ministry, he was receiving a lot of praise and adoration, and people were hailing him as the King of the Jews. But by the end, it was the opposite. They were belittling him, they were mocking him, they were harming him, and they were hating him. But he didn't stop. Despite the unappreciation, or the very opposite of appreciation, the hatred of people, he continued through the beatings and the torture. He continued on to his own execution, even though he did not deserve that death, that punishment. But he did it for people like me. And he did it for people like you. So yeah, if you've been living in hypocrisy, it's not about fixing yourself and getting it right. It's about seeing Jesus on the cross doing that for you and accepting him as your Savior and leading you in a different direction. So Jesus kept doing good, and if you're not being thanked, keep doing good and don't give up. Keep obeying God and believe and follow him. Let me pray. Jesus, I thank you for the example that you set, Lord. That is powerful, powerful imagery of what you laid out for us, that as we work, as we try and go and do our good works, and we crave appreciation. We crave to be thanked, Lord. But you were the least deserving of punishment. You were the least deserving of hatred, and yet you got all of it, and you got the opposite of appreciation, and you continued and you soldiered on, Lord. And so we just pray that you would help us to imitate you tonight. Lord, I just lift up every heart in this room I pray over the hypocrisy in our lives, Lord, that you would convict us, you would change our hearts, you would lead us to the foot of your cross to lay that hypocrisy before you, lay that doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, Lord, or if it's doing one thing, saying another, Lord, we just lay that before your feet. And I pray over my own hypocrisy, past and present, Lord, that you would just forgive that and that you would lead me into more genuine followership of you. And I pray that you do the same over all of us tonight. In your name we pray. Amen.